Welcome, everybody, to Firehouse Talks with Jersey Rick, igniting leadership excellence. I'm Rick, and this is my co host, Emily.
Hi.
We are in season 2, episode number 35. Leaders have a responsibility to develop others,
Mm,
something I very strongly believe in. Emily and I talk about everything and all things related to leadership. And also, I neglected to mention this in the last podcast. You don't have to be a firefighter to listen to us. Leadership crosses all realms, all professions, all careers. And also, we do approach this from a biblical worldview. So, we've talked about that. Today's episode is leaders have a responsibility to develop others. Leadership is not just about directing, it is about developing.
yeah, so like a seed in the ground, growth takes time, patience, and
Mm,
intentional effort. And
absolutely.
Mark Twain says that growth is inevitable, but leaders must nurture it.
Yes.
So, on today's episode, we are going to talk about why development matters, how to do it effectively, and strategies for prioritization.
Yeah.
Easy for me to say.
Yeah. So let's jump real quick back to that quote from Mark Twain. Growth is inevitable, but leaders must nurture it. And I've never really been good at gardening. And it's especially difficult, here in Colorado with the soil that we have, the
Yeah.
altitude, the climate, so forth, like that. But hey, growing up in New Jersey, Jersey tomatoes are they're the
Mm,
absolute best. But
yeah.
and there's some folks back there, they really know how to nurture those plants to get, really great tomatoes. But it takes like my Uncle Cliff, Emily, that yeah, you never met him. He died before you were born,
Yeah.
and he always had a garden, and he would hand till that thing. He didn't have a power tiller. That guy, he just get out there and he'd hand till it. He had a great garden, and he nurtured that thing every day. So I just wanted to jump back there real quick to that. So I'll turn that back over to you now.
Yeah, so we're going to start with the responsibility of leadership development. Responsibility. So, why do leaders have a duty to cultivate the growth of employees, families, and peers?
Yeah, and I'm glad that you added in there family as well.
Yeah,
So it's because developing other people is not just simply confined to work,
yeah,
or peers. And I want to talk about family first, and I want to talk to the men who are listening in. I want to address this to the fathers. Excuse me. What are you doing to nurture your family? Are you an absent father? Is your career number one in your life, and your family, they come someplace like number five, number six? Are you the type of man, the type of husband, type of father that you spend endless hours at work, and then when you come home, you plop yourself down in front of the idiot box to watch your favorite sport? Or you go off and you play video games and neglect your family? Yeah, you're going to pay for that. You're going
yeah.
to pay for that down the road. And so you the Bible says, bring up your children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And so raising children is a responsibility, man. Taking care of our families is a responsibility. Taking care of our wives and protecting and providing, that's a responsibility that we have. And there's far too many men, excuse
Yeah.
me, who neglect that responsibility. Now, for the ladies that are out there who just you say, Rick, I don't have a husband. He ran off, we're divorced, or I'm a widow. And I can address that because my dad died when I was 14 years old. I'm the guy that found him when I came home from the back door. It was his fifth heart attack. And from that point until I was out of the home after I graduated high school, and my brother is younger than me, my mom was a single parent, and she worked at the glass factories and on a rotating shift. But there's still a responsibility there to your children. Don't neglect your children. Excuse me.
Could I add something in the
Yeah,
family
absolutely.
department? Something I appreciated about you is when you were on duty, you would always take time out of your day to call mom and check in on her. And you guys would like talk about each other's days, whether that was like 10 minutes or
Mhm.
half hour one. It was something that was a consistent pattern. And then for us girls, you would always take time and take us out on coffee dates and or ice cream dates. And I really treasured those times, but we felt like we were heard and loved, and you did like take that time for us,
Mm.
which I think was really, really important.
Now, thank you, Emily, for adding that, and we'll jump back to the phone call to mom. For you people who don't know, I spent a career in the fire service, 37 years on the job. And I would call home, initially when we were working 24-hour shifts, 24 on, off for 3 shifts, and then had 4 days off. Sometimes we had 4 days off. And then we went to a 48-hour shift, 40 hours on, and then again, sometimes 4 days off because they kept us pretty busy as battalion chiefs. And excuse me, I got to clear my throat here real quick. So I would always wait until I would call home about 9 o'clock at night if we were out on an emergency or an extended emergency. And yeah, mom usually knew, hey, there's no phone call. They must be out. And
Yep.
when there was a break, in the command vehicle, I'd send a text on a call. And who would know whenever I would get back. But I felt that that was important to stay connected with mom to find out what was going on here at the house. Was there anything that came up with you girls that I needed to know about? I wanted to know about your days. How did things go, in school? Depending on what time I called, I might even be able to talk to you guys. And then it was, that connection, planning out, the next day when we came off. And guys, uh, 2 daughters, Emily and Rebecca, and I took them on dates, and I still do. I
Mhm.
still do take them on dates. There's a lot of dirt bags running around out there that prey on women, and we as fathers have a responsibility to take care of and protect our daughters.
Yep.
Excuse me. So that comes in from that aspect there of cultivating the growth and the development. Because when I went out with you and Rebecca, it wasn't just, initially when you were younger, going out to get a soda or ice cream, and when you got older, coffee. Now, we had meaningful conversations.
And still do.
Yes, and
Yeah.
still do. Now, and when we build those meaningful conversations and relationships with our children, that's an opportunity. It was opportunity for me as dad to share my experiences with my daughters and for them to share their lives with me and share their concerns. But when we shut them out, there's going to be problems.
Mhm.
Don't be that person that down the road when you're in your 30s, you're saying to somebody, I don't know why my girls don't want anything to do with me. And I've seen that. I had a guy make that comment to me at one time. I don't know why my girls don't want anything to do with me. I was like, well, have you been present in their lives? And it's very, very easy for us to spend more time at work than at home. As a firefighter, when I looked at my monthly schedule, I was at the firehouse more than I was home.
Yeah.
And so that meant capitalizing on that time, nurturing those relationships. And so from a developmental standpoint, Emily, we tend to just look at it solely from a professional level,
Mhm.
but it also crosses over to the personal level with family and then also friends.
Yeah.
What, how do we pour into the lives of our friends? What do we do, with them? Well, we might go out to lunch, supper, go out to coffee, might engage in a sport with them, maybe hunting, fishing, that type of thing. And, there's opportunities to develop relationships and in a very informal way, help them out because the tighter relationships that we have, the more likelihood that they're going to ask us questions, that they need help in a particular area. So with those two avenues from family and friends, let's come into now, talking about, employees,
Mhm.
the troops, which I prefer that term, the troops versus employees
Mhm.
or the crews, because of the environment, that I worked on. So I have a duty as a leader, and I still do have a duty. And one verse that really stands out to me so much from the Bible is out of Luke chapter 12, verse 48. To whom much is given, much is required, and to whom more is given, even more is required. A few moments ago, I mentioned coming home from school and finding dad on the floor dead from his fifth heart attack. God has allowed me to live way beyond the age that dad was
Yeah.
when he died. I've had that opportunity to learn a lot. Now, for the people who go down the entitlement angle, saying, "Oh yeah, and look at you, God's giving you this, and God's giving you that," hey, and I'm going to throw it out there, this nonsense that people talk about white privilege. Yeah, baloney. If you grew up in a Davis household in Cedarville, New Jersey, yeah, you just seen something about privilege. Yeah, privilege. Having a dad that could no longer work because of a bum heart. And at the time period growing up, medicine is not what it was like it is today. Completely, totally different. Watching your mom go off working in the glass factories, scraping along, having the church up the street bring us food because we didn't have any money. So any of you people out there, you want to talk about this nonsense of privilege, I'd be glad to engage in that conversation, you know, with you. Cars that, were mechanically broken down, yeah, growing up from age 14 on without a dad, watching your mom work in the factories, uh-huh. Yeah, privilege. Military, yeah. So I'll leave it at that right there. Yeah. So that give that entitlement crap and throw it away. To whom much is given, much is required. To whom more is given, even more is required. Leaders, fathers, mothers, aunts, uncles, we have a duty to develop those people who are around us, whether formally or informally. And from the formal standpoint, of a leadership standpoint, if you're a supervisor, you've got a responsibility to develop the people around you from a tactical aspect, and then also from a personal aspect as well.
Mhm.
You lock yourself off into a cubicle someplace and you don't engage with people, you're not developing them. In our
Yeah.
last episode, episode number 34, I talked about a battalion chief that I had and how he was just completely, totally disconnected from the crews. I mean, he never, ever took one move whatsoever to develop people.
Mhm.
Not even from a tactical aspect.
Wow.
Not at all. So yes, we as leaders, and I'm going to emphasize this again, we have that duty to cultivate the growth. And when we do that, that actually becomes a recruiting tool.
Mm.
And when people from the outside are looking to become part of your organization, if it's fire, police, EMS, or maybe you have a business, or it's even a bigger corporation, and people are doing their research, if they're smart, they're going to look into how are the people developed. They're going to look beyond just, well, what's the paycheck? What are the benefits? But how are you developing people? That can become a very good recruiting tool to recruit the people that you want working for you. So you can get beyond, you know, Bill and Betty Schmuckatelli that are just looking for the place who's got the good salary. So after you hire them and train them, and then they're gone a year later because somebody else is paying, a whole lot more. Excuse me. And it enhances retention. Many of you listening to this podcast have probably heard it said, uh, people don't leave a company, they leave a leader, or they leave, actually, better analogy, they leave a manager,
Mm.
because leaders are working with people. So yeah, I've had some folks out there in my life that they put time into my life, and the one that really comes to mind that I've mentioned him in the past, Emily, is Chief Miner, Dick Miner,
Mm-hmm.
and that guy would spend time with me if I to stop by his office, to ask him a question about something, related to the fire service, operationally, tactically. He spent time with me, and we had some really great conversations. When I got promoted to battalion chief, he was already retired from the department, and he was working up at Platte River Power Authority then, the fire department there. I called him up, told him I got promoted battalion chief, said, "Hey, would you be willing to sit down with me and I could pick your brain about what it's like now to be a chief officer?" And he said, "Absolutely." We went out for coffee and he spent a couple of hours with me. And not only then, but later, when
Mm-hmm.
he asked me to come in and provide training up there at PRPA to the people in that fire department, he would spend time with me, mentoring me. He really believed in the importance of developing other people.
That's great. So we talked about the responsibility of leadership development. We also want to talk that, it's a growth process. So there's definitely patience involved. So like going back to that seed
Yeah,
analogy, just like a seed grows into a tree, leadership development requires time and
yeah.
nurturing. So there's dangers of unrealistic expectations,
Mm.
which could be rushing development, leads to burnout and frustration.
Yeah, absolutely. That quote that you read earlier from Mark Twain, we talked about that seed, we talked about a tomato plant. It, it takes time. Growth, growth takes time.
Yeah.
I know a fella here. We meet at a weekly roundtable, and his name's Matt Martindale. And Matt does a lot of things. We laugh. He's a mortgage broker, but he also DJs weddings, and his parents own a farm, and so he's also Farmer Matt. Yeah. And Matt a couple weeks ago shared a great story about growth,
Hmm.
and related to the book of John chapter 15, and abiding in the vine, and
Yeah.
Matt was talking about grapes, and he raises grapes, which actually thought was an amazing feat here in Colorado, that somebody can raise grapes. But yesterday he said, "Yeah, in another week or two," and when we're recording this, folks, at the end of March, and he said, "In another week or two, me and my brother are going to be cutting asparagus." And so Matt, being growing up on a farm and being involved with it and still helping his parents, understands that growth process from an agricultural standpoint. That So they're getting ready to cut asparagus. It's like they didn't just go out and put the seed in last week and now boop. Yeah, not like the chia seed things. Like the animals or the head, you water it and all of a sudden chia seeds, pop up. Those stupid advertisements, on television. So that ties into unrealistic expectations. Hey, here's a shocker. People are different.
Hmm. Everyone learns differently.
Yeah, everyone learns differently.
Yeah.
Just because we, as the leaders, may pick up on something quickly, doesn't mean that somebody who's working for us does.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'll use me as a personal example. I struggle with math.
I was thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not for you,
Yeah,
but for me.
yeah, you struggle with math. Rebecca struggles with math. That math gene just passed over this part of our family.
Completely.
Yeah, completely. And I've been in situations in the past where, uh, I've had supervisors, like when I was in the military, initially in the military, going through training, that got so frustrated with me because I couldn't grasp some of the electronic concepts. Because before I was able to get into firefighting in the military, I got stuck in electronics, which I detested and I hated, and I didn't understand the concepts with it because a lot of it was math.
Hmm.
And I actually had a supervisor say, "What are you, stupid?"
Hmm.
Uh,
Wow.
no, I'm not stupid. I'm not a stupid guy. And so just because this clown could understand the concepts and grasp them, I couldn't.
Mhm.
Yeah, I didn't do that. And moving along in even in the world of firefighting, when I got involved in hazmat, there's some folks that they could be great. They might be great public safety divers, or they might be great at swift water. But when it come down to hazmat, yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah, hey, there's a leak. We need to stop that leak. But when it got into the chemical aspect of it, they would struggle. They
Mm,
would
yeah.
struggle with the fact that chemical A is going to react with chemical B, and why is it going to react? And so people learn at different paces. I've done an awful lot of training and teaching over the years, and even now, Emily, being involved in the singles group in our church, teaching that group right there. We average about 17 people
Mhm.
on a Sunday. There's different learning levels to come in there.
Yeah.
So if I set my personal expectations so high that people are going to grasp concepts and they're going to grasp principles and they're going to understand what's being taught, then I'm going to get frustrated because they're not meeting the expectations. And then they're going to get frustrated at me because I'm frustrated with them.
Yeah.
And we can't always rush development. There's some people, it takes time for them to think through things.
Yeah.
I could sit down with someone and mentor them or coach them, and we can have a conversation. And I could see on their face, like, you know, they're really thinking about this, but they haven't grasped it yet. Maybe by the end of the time I'm getting ready to leave, then I get it,
Yeah.
or it might be the next time we meet. Hey, Rick, I understand now what you were talking about. I have seen it with one guy. I told him, I said, I can't motivate you. And he said, what? He said, it's your job to motivate me as a battalion chief. I says, nah, I says, it's my job to create an environment that where you could be motivated.
Yeah.
I said, but I can't motivate you. And he said, uh-huh. About 2 years later, he came to me when by that time, he was an officer, he was a lieutenant. And he said, I get it. I
Mm.
understand what you
Wow.
were saying. He said, it took me 2 years. He said, but I understand. He said, now as a company officer, I can create an environment that can motivate people, but the individual motivation is up to that person right there. So yeah, absolutely, Emily, the patients that involved, and when we are impatient, they know it. We
Mhm.
must recognize the different growth rates in people. There's a lot more really that we could talk about this right here. We spend a lot of time, a lot of money putting people through a recruit academy. And as I mentioned here a few moments ago, I've done an awful lot of teaching and training over the years. And frankly, there have been those people. Fortunately, they've been, on the rarer side that they just could not grasp it. They did not understand it. Everybody else is moving along in the academy. If they were getting tutoring to help them along and they kept falling behind further and further and further behind, it would just get down to the point is like, then they're failing their tests, can only fail a certain amount of tests. And it's like, well, you're done.
Mm.
Or somebody
Mhm.
from the physical aspect of it. Regardless of how somebody worked with them, and I'll use ladders. And you can't throw a ladder and you're a firefighter, you're done.
Sad.
And
Mhm.
and that's the hard aspect too of leadership is recognizing when you have an employee that you've done what you can do for them and it's time to cut the strings and let them go.
Yeah.
And many, many times they already know that they aren't performing. So, like I said, Emily, we could really spend a lot more time, folks. And
We
what we're
could.
talking about here today is coming out of my book, The Furnace of Leadership Development. I'd love for you to go buy that book. You could get it in paperback, audiobook, and ebook form on Amazon, and
Yeah.
you're going to learn a lot more about what we are talking about today.
Yeah. In more depth.
Yeah.
But something I want to add with having patience is when that cultivates an environment of safety
Mm,
for the person you're
yes.
developing, which that cultivates trust. Like
Hmm.
you have to have safety and trust and connection. They all tie hand in
Yeah.
hand together. But when you are impatient with someone and you're showing that, that will not cultivate a safety of trust, but instead will cultivate an environment of fear. And then that person who you're trying to develop is living in fear, then they're going to make more mistakes. Like if you're fearful, you do end up making more mistakes because you're walking on eggshells and
Yeah.
worried about what the other person is thinking or
Absolutely.
what the punishment is going to be.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great point. Thank you for injecting that. And when you're saying that, Emily, I'm thinking back to high school, my
Mm.
junior and senior
Mhm.
year in high school. Mr. Blake, I got involved in the graphic arts program. And in the graphic arts program, you could take two tracks, learning how to run an offset printing press, or you could learn the front end of the printing business, which was the photography aspect and doing all the layout work. I was interested in the printing press aspect. And so this is the type of teacher Mr. Blake was. He was he was a renegade. Because here we are. I mean, he's smoking in the class. Okay. Yeah, yeah, he's smoking in the class. No, full well he's not supposed to. And but what he was doing is he was taking in our junior year, he would teach us certain aspects of running the press. But what really impressed me is I had a senior that was teaching me.
Hmm.
And that senior, his name was Charlie Bergen.
Mhm.
And when I found out Charlie Bergen, and I asked him at one point, I said, "Is your dad Charlie Bergen that works at Messick Brothers Construction?" Then he said, "No, that's my uncle. You know him?" I said, "I do know him. He was one of the pallbearers at my dad's funeral."
Hmm. Wow.
And so Charlie Bergen, the senior, had the same personality as Charlie Bergen from Messick Brothers, his uncle. And Charlie was teaching me how to run the printing press. And Mr. Blake would come over every now and then, and he would supervise and he would check and he would offer tips that, hey, this is how you guys can do this. You could tweak this, you could tweak that. If we ran into a big problem, yo, one of us would go get Mr. Blake and he'd come over and he would troubleshoot it. And he'd say, okay, hey, here it is, and this is how you fix it. Then it was great, Emily. It was such an early lesson on that.
That's cool.
And then my senior year, guess what I was doing?
Mentoring the
Mentoring.
others.
I was teaching the junior in the class how to run that printing press. And Mr. Blake was not hovering over me,
Yeah.
you know, and
He gave you space to grow and to have that space to mentor, like replicate.
yeah, absolutely. He
Mhm.
created that environment that
Yeah.
you just talked about there. He created a safe place. If something went wrong, if I made a mistake, he didn't come running out there yelling and screaming and cussing and foaming at the mouth. He came out there and say, "Okay, well, let's just take a look at this thing." Aha. Ah, I see. I see what you're doing because there could be some really, fine-tuning things to run those printing presses. I'm sure it's changed now, but something just as simple as suction cups picking up pieces of paper and feeding them in. If that wasn't adjusted just right, it could pick up too many and jam the
Mhm.
paper, or it wouldn't pick up any at all. And so he was able to teach us that finesse.
Hmm.
The Germans have a word for that called Fingerspitzengefühl.
Well,
It's a fingertip touch.
wow.
Yeah, but he created that environment. So yeah, thanks for bringing that
That's
up.
cool. Yeah, and just something I thought of too is if you're the person looking to be developed and you're looking for a mentor or a coach, like you can interview them too and
Mhm.
be honest with them with what you need and be honest with them.
Yeah.
If you see them getting impatient, be like, look, like I am trying to grasp this, but I'm a slower processor or I have to think about it for a
Mhm.
minute. Like I can't just think on the spot. Like
Yeah.
be honest with what you need and how you are, and that might help too with that like relationship and cultivating that patience.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. And I seen that too in the fire department when I would hold my monthly officers meetings. And there was one guy. that he had a lot of great ideas and he's extremely intelligent individual, but he was a processor. And where somebody else, another officer, might be able to, yeah, if I was asking a question, about, training, hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing for training for, the shift, is where a couple other guys might be able to bang, 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 you know, say offer up, he was a thinker.
Yeah.
And I could see it taking place
See the
in
wheels
him.
turning.
Yeah, you could see the wheels turning. And sometimes that created issues with the other officers
Hmm.
because they thought he was being coy.
Hmm.
And as I got to know him, he wasn't. He wasn't playing a game. It was like, I I really want to think
Yeah.
about this one. Can I have some time to think about this?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for bringing those things up,
Yeah,
Emily.
super important. So in episode 34, we talked about the Benjamin Franklin Bridge that was connecting Philadelphia, Pennsylvania to Camden, New Jersey over the Delaware River.
Hmm.
Prior to that, people had to use the ferry to cross the river. So it was a very big deal when that bridge came in. And that correlates with leaders must connect with people
Yeah.
to develop them effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. Folks, if you haven't listened to episode 34, I encourage you when you get done here, go back
Yeah.
because you're not going to be able to develop people if you don't connect with them.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you enter a developmental relationship with somebody from a transactional standpoint, meaning that I'm going to tell you what you need to do and then I expect you to do it. That's not going to work. Development is transformational. We see a transformation taking place in that other person. And that ties back into having realistic expectations and being patient with people. You know, building those relationships, identifying and bridging those gaps in their skills, their KSAs, knowledge, skills, and abilities.
Mhm.
Sometimes you could see that gap, especially in a technical skill, a hands-on skill, and in a technique that somebody is performing. You could see there's a gap that exists there. In our world, in the firefighting world, somebody's fumbling around with a chainsaw, and they can't get the thing started. Well, okay, there's a little gap right there, so let's get them with the right person. Floyd was the guy, that could teach them
Oh, yeah.
how to,
Yeah.
properly, operate. And actually, from the company officer standpoint too, if they had a firefighter that was struggling with the chainsaw, that was their duty, to, hey, show them how to operate, this chainsaw. Don't just let them, struggle along, with that.
Yeah.
And coming back to the hazmat world that I've been involved with for so many years, I was out in California in December of 2024 doing a training. It was the final exercise on a Thursday night, and it was a rail car exercise. We got two men up on top of the rail car, and they are attempting to fix a leak, the simulated leak, and number three was down on the ground and it's referred to as a chlorine C kit. It's used for chlorine rail cars, 90-ton chlorine rail car. Well, the bar is big and it's heavy. And this guy was trying to put this bar into this small bucket. And so the guys up top, now listen, folks, they said, why do you do that? Number one, they're wearing SCBA, self-contained breathing apparatus, which the face piece has a tendency to fog over. And they are, on top of that, wearing level A, fully encapsulated chemical protective clothing, which the face piece on that starts to fog up. And they have triple layer of gloves. And so there's already all these physical limitations. So before any of you who have never done that, start to, want to criticize them, stop it. And, stop it and either go watch this stuff or, go see if you could do it yourself. But I standing back. This is their final exercise. It's a pass fail night. They don't get to go home. None of us get to go home. until they fixed these leaks because our simulation was a rail car derailment and it was more than one leak. So they pull up the bucket, the thing's falling out. And after a couple times that I need to intervene. And I went over and I got as close to the guy's ear as I possibly could because it's hard to hear in those suits. And I said, remember your firefighter one skills. I said, what's not happening here? He says, it's falling out of the bucket. And I said, what's a firefighter one skill you can do with a half hitch? And he went, oh yeah. And he wrapped a half hitch around that bar and whoop up to the top of the rail car.
Hmm.
The thing went.
That's a
So
great
yeah,
example because you didn't step in and be like, here, I'm taking over. You stepped in, but had him think about
yeah,
what he could do. And he then had to take that personal responsibility. And I bet that felt good for him too, that he remembered
yeah,
what to do. And then he was able to solve the problem with you just guiding him
yes.
and not taking over and controlling.
You're right. And he came to me later on and he said, he says, you know what, Chief? He said, I got so wrapped up in tunnel vision thinking that there's got to be some type of a hazmat solution that I'm missing here. And he said, I totally forgot my basic firefighter one skills until you came over there
Hmm.
and you said that, and then it clicked. You know, because it's like, hey, yeah, you need a pike pull or a tool up to the roof. All right, put a clove hitch and a half hitch around that thing and haul it on up. And
Yeah.
so yeah, in that questioning,
Hmm.
that's actually true coaching,
Yeah.
Emily, is
Yep.
asking the other person a question there. And so, you talked about the Ben Franklin Bridge connecting, Camden, yeah, with Philly. And that's connecting. There was a gap there. There was a gap there in that skill. They're in training. It's the final exercise. And so, hey, it got going. And that also ties into, we've talked about that and creating that environment where growth thrives.
Yeah.
It absolutely thrives.
And he did thrive based off of your questioning and not accusing him.
Yeah.
Like, what are you stupid? Why don't you know what to do?
Yeah, like what
You
happened
know?
to me when I was in the service. Hey, you
Yeah.
stupid.
Yeah. So, what are some practical strategies for development?
Well, first of all, take a look at the individual.
Hmm.
You know, what is your role as the leader? Where are you at in the pecking order? In the fire service, we have company officers. That means whether it's the engine company, the truck, uh, depending on your part of the country, you might also refer to that as the ladder, or is it a rescue company? But the guy, the gal who's running that company has that responsibility. As the battalion chief, you've got a wider group of people to train and mentor. It's the same thing in the law enforcement. You got, depending on the organization, might be corporals, sergeants, lieutenants, so forth like that, field training officers. And the organization may have a formal plan. We had a task book. So they graduate from the fire academy and they're certified as a firefighter one and two and hazardous materials operations, but they're in their rookie year. So they get assigned out to a station, they get assigned to an officer, and then there was a task book that needed to be accomplished, that they had to demonstrate their capabilities in performing these various tasks, whether it would be pulling hose off the back of the rig, advancing it into the building, throwing ladders, the search maze, and any number of those type of things. And then also from my standpoint, as a battalion chief, I'm looking at potential amongst the shift. Who are from the firefighter standpoint, all right, yeah, they might have just come out of the academy and be in their first or second year, but what qualities do they have that is making them stand out that they're going to be an officer down the road? Which qualities does the engineer or do the engineers have as a driver operators that's going to make them a good officer down there? Not everybody, because some don't want it. It's the same thing as they move up in rank. When I started looking at the lieutenants and the captains, is okay, which of these folks are going to make a good battalion chief. I start looking for those leadership, qualities in them. And then I had a plan. I would stair step people through training based off of where they were at. I love spending time out in the station talking about this stuff,
Mhm.
mentoring. But with my officers, I had 7 lieutenants and 2 captains on the shift. And in that monthly meeting, wasn't only just passing on stuff, but we would talk about the challenges that they were facing, and it was essentially like a big mastermind. Somebody in another station might say, "Yeah, hey, I've dealt with something like this in the past, and this is how I handled it." But I would provide a different level of training to the captains, to the 2 captains, because they were functioning as acting battalion chiefs. And actually, we had defined a plan to get people qualified to act up as a lieutenant, act up as a captain, act up as a battalion chief. And part of that acting as a battalion chief, they had to spend 3 whole sets of shifts with us. I'd drive, they'd ride. Set number 2, they'd drive, I'd ride.
Mhm.
Number 3, they're in the vehicle by themselves, and I'm in a backup staff vehicle.
Mm.
I'd respond, but it would be I would delay
Mm.
because now they're on their own. They're coming out the door, they're on their own, and they did not need any one of us other battalion chiefs right on their tail, following them up the street, responding to
Yeah.
whatever it was. And I'll tell you, that was hard. That's hard
Yeah.
because, I'm an operational guy. It's like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, all right, we're gonna fire. Let's go. Let's go. I want to go." And so it's hard, just standing back and making sure they're out the door. And then I'd go
Mhm.
down to the other vehicle and I'd give it a couple minutes
Mm.
and then go. And then that way, that allowed him time to get on scene and be able to do what he needed to do before I would show up. And then, depending on the situation, I may not even had gone up to the command vehicle. I might have just parked back down the block to where I could see what was going on and where I could listen. And recently, I faced a situation where it really boils down to leveling the playing field for everybody. Baloney. Who are you going to level that playing field to? What level? I had a man on my shift
Yeah.
that had a PhD in chemistry.
Mm.
Was I going to level the playing field where he was at?
Mm-mm.
Was I going to level the playing field to the man on my shift that was a very high performer, very intelligent individual? Or was I going to level the playing field to a lowest performing person?
Mm.
So, folks, that business of, well, let's level the playing field, that's a bunch of garbage.
Mhm.
That's a bunch of garbage. People are different, and we talked about that. We talked about recognizing that, and that comes into the strategy as well. Your high performers need to be challenged,
Yeah.
and that could be difficult. It could be difficult to find what it takes to challenge them. Your low performers need to be challenged as well. But if I had my low performers and we were challenging them the same way as we were challenging the high performers, it's not going to go very well
Yeah.
at all. And then provide feedback, honest feedback, honest feedback. You know, Tell them how they are doing. I remember a situation we responded on a Saturday night to a fire. It was up in the Big Thompson Canyon, and there was volunteer firefighters up there. And the guy got on scene, and you could hear the propane tanks behind him when he keyed up the radio. And he was talking on the radio. You could hear the propane tanks behind him venting. That's a very bad sign. There was 2 500-gallon propane tanks
Ooh.
on the side of this church too. And if they went, it's called BLEVE, boiling liquid expanding vapor explosion.
Mm.
There's going to be some really big problems that take place up there. And frankly, this guy was very panicked. on the radio. I got a dash cam. Everything's being recorded, video and audio. And we're going to do an after action review. Well, I called him up and I told him, because we were going to do the after action review on a Tuesday night out of Station 2. I said, you need to meet me at Station 2 at 6 o'clock.
Mm.
I said, there's something you need to hear. And he showed up, and he had even admitted, Emily, in the command vehicle. He said, I really screwed that up. He said, I sounded like such an amateur, you know. And I said, that
Mhm.
is even being recorded
Wow.
on the camera right there.
Yeah.
So I got him down and I said, well, let's go in the other room by ourselves. And I said, you need to listen to this. I said, it's your radio traffic. And he listened to it. And I said, we have to talk about this in the AAR. We cannot gloss over this. I said, this is a learning opportunity for you and for others. I did not want to ambush him. That would have done nothing but create hate and discontent and animosity.
Yeah.
You know, but bringing him in, talking about it, it also helped that he acknowledged that fact that's what he did. You know, that was a growth point for him. And then finally, in this area right here, a strategy is, hey, encourage continuous learning. You know, books, mentorship, training programs, hands-on experience. Find a mentor. It's good to have a mentor in the organization. I met with a fellow the other day from another fire department, and he's looking for a mentor. And he's got a couple mentors in his organization, but he needs somebody from outside the organization. He needs somebody who has a different view.
Hmm.
He needs somebody, and I shared this with him, is you need somebody to be able to point things out that's not going to turn around and put it in your evaluation.
Yeah.
That's safe, you know, and that's where there's a benefit to having a mentor outside of the organization.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Well, so as we wrap up this episode, let's recap the key takeaways that we discussed. That one, leadership development is an ongoing investment.
yep.
And then two, growth takes time. So make sure to exercise your patience. And then connecting with people and providing guidance is
Mhm.
essential. And lastly, prioritize development efforts effectively. So we want to leave you with this challenge. Identify one person that you can develop this week
And Emily, I just thought of something.
or begin developing
I'm glad I
as it's
thought of this
process.
now. Hey, listen, a couple of years ago, we were down in North Carolina on the shore,
Oh, yeah.
and I was walking on the beach in the evening time with my daughter, Rebecca, and we were down there on the edge of the water. And I turned around and I looked, and there's both of our footprints in the wet sand, and it being highlighted by the setting sun. And I thought, I'm going to take a picture of this. I said, this is going to come in handy at some point. Well, it did. That very next month in my weekly blog, I wrote about mentoring,
Hmm.
called it Dual Footprints. And then I think it was be 2023,
Yeah.
sat down with Emily and we developed that into an ebook. It's called Dual Footprints, Becoming a World-Class Mentor.
Yeah.
If you would like a copy of that, I can send it to you. My contact information is in the show notes, but send me an email, rick@fireofficerleadershipacademy.com, and I will send you a copy of that, a complimentary copy of that. Again, it's rick@fireofficerleadershipacademy.com, and I will send you a complimentary copy of Dual Footprints, Becoming a World-Class Mentor. So,
Yeah.
Emily, as we wrap this up, do you have any other thoughts?
No, I think we covered quite a bit.
Yeah, we did. And folks, if you couldn't pick up on the fact that I love this topic, well, maybe listen to it again. again. So, hey, if you have found this episode to be useful, please like, subscribe, and share. Visit my website at fireofficerleadershipacademy.com. You'll see the services that I have to offer, including mentoring and coaching. You'll
Yeah.
find a link on the upper left side of the website to my weekly blog. Gets posted at 0500 on Monday mornings Mountain Time. And then on Wednesday mornings at 0500, it gets released out on my LinkedIn profile. So that's it for now. Thank you for tuning in. We appreciate those of you who are listening and those of you who are watching the podcast on YouTube. So until next time, we'll see
Bye.
you later. Bye.